friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Whether you're sketching plans for your first raised beds or wondering why last season's garden didn't quite live up to your expectations, I hope these next few minutes give you the answers you've been looking for. In today's video, I want to cover 9 of the most overlooked raised bed mistakes that beginners make. For those of you who are still in the planning stage, you are in the perfect spot to do things optimally right from the start. And if you've already built your beds, no worries. Most of these problems have simple fixes that won't require starting over. In fact, mistake number 6 nearly ruined my growing season last year, but the solution took less than an hour to implement and all was well. So if you've invested time and money in raised beds, or you're about to, hang out with me for a few minutes. I just might be able to save you some money and headache. Let's get started. If you would like help planning a productive garden, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for a free garden printable. We calculated quantities for a year's supply of the most common garden vegetables and organized them into a neat chart to help you plan. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on gardening and food preservation, food storage, and more. The first mistake is jumping into raised bed gardening without proper planning. I get it, we are all so excited to just get growing, but if you can take just one weekend to map things out, you can save months of frustration in the future. Sketch out your garden space, measurement, think about your water excess, how far will you need to drag that hose, consider how you'll move between the beds, is there enough space for a wheelbarrow, will you need paths, is the ground already level, or do you need to adjust for slopes? Those are just a few of the things that you'll want to consider. Taking time to plan is actually one of my favorite parts of gardening, and it prevents costly mistakes down the road. For the remainder of this video, we will cover points and/or tasks that you really want or need to plan ahead for in order to see that explosive growth in your garden that you want. We'll talk about these tips in the form of mistakes and just do the opposite. Okay, so mistake number 2 is ignoring the sun. This is huge and something that you want to get right straight from the beginning. Most vegetables need 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight every day. The problem is that spot that feels sunny in your backyard might only get 3 to 4 hours of true sunlight, and you won't know if you don't track it. So here's what I recommend. Spend one day tracking the sun across your property. Mark where shadows fall at different times of day. Consider tree lines and any structures like sheds and even your neighbor's tree if that's a consideration. You might be surprised at what you find out. For most of us in the northern hemisphere, the south side of your house is prime garden real estate. Any north-facing areas will be better suited for shade-loving ornamentals, but not your tomatoes and peppers. Mistake number 3 is also about where and how you place your raised beds, but for a different reason. I see this all the time and actually just made this mistake myself. Yes, a total facepalm moment. I just obviously was not thinking that day. But it's when people, like me, line their fences with beautiful raised beds, but they can't reach the back half of the plants. Or they build beds so wide that they can't easily lean in to reach the middle comfortably. A good rule of thumb is to keep your raised beds 4 feet maximum in width. Most people can comfortably reach about 2 feet without straining. So 4 feet is the limit if you can access both sides of the bed. The bed that you just saw is 4 feet, and if you're placing that type of bed against a fence or a wall like I did, be sure to cut that width in half or simply move the bed away from the fence so that you can access all sides. If you are limited on space and you really need to put raised beds against a fence, then I would recommend 2 feet maximum in width. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting to reach and maintain those back plants all season. Okay, mistake number 4 is using the wrong type of building materials if you're going the DIY route. Traditional pressure-treated lumber contains chemicals that can leach into your soil. Another somewhat novelty thing that I've seen on social media, especially in recent years when building raised beds, is using railroad ties. But those contain creosote. Definitely not something you want near your food. Instead, choose naturally rot-resistant woods like cedar or cypress. Yes, they cost more up front, but they'll last longer and keep your food safe. Some other great options that are a little bit more frugal is untreated hardwoods, although they're not going to last as long. Concrete blocks, this is what I recommend, practically lasts forever. Metal raised bed kits, or making them out of stone or brick. If budget is concerned, look for reclaimed materials like old shipping pallets. Just make sure they are heat treated, usually marked with the letters HT, and not chemically treated, otherwise you would want to avoid those too. A quick note on concrete blocks. Make sure to get true concrete blocks and not those older style cinder blocks, which are made with fly ash, which is again not something you want near your food. Thankfully, most modern concrete blocks no longer use fly ash in their production, but it's good to ask about it before buying them. Mistake number 5 is filling your beds with plain topsoil and expecting excellent results. The truth is, in a raised bed, your plants only have access to whatever nutrients you put in that box, unless, of course, you don't put a bottom on your raised bed, and that is an option. But regular topsoil doesn't have enough nutrients to support heavy feeding vegetables, and most of our summer vegetables are very heavy feeders. Instead, you want to create a mixture. A good starting formula is 40% topsoil, 40% compost, multiple sources if possible, 10% aged manure or some other type of natural fertilizer, and 10% of aeration materials like perlite, vermiculite, or fine pine bark. Depending on how loose your compost and topsoil blends are, you may not even need the aeration materials. But for the compost, I recommend a blend of kitchen compost, worm castings, and mushroom compost. For the 10% of aged manure and or other fertilized option, I highly recommend horse manure and or cotton burr compost. Cotton burr compost is essentially made from the leftovers after harvesting cotton. Such a mix will give your plants everything they need to grow way more abundantly than you ever thought possible. Okay, mistake number 6 is skipping the mulch and leaving your soil bare and exposed. This was the mistake that I was making when I first started my first concrete raised bed, and I had no idea why my plants were suffering. But raised beds dry out so much faster than in-ground gardens, especially if you're using concrete blocks or metal raised beds that get very hot in the summer. The beautiful soil that you just mixed and filled your beds with now needs protection from the sun and wind and evaporation. Just as small as a 2-inch layer of mulch can cut your water requirements in half. It can also suppress weeds, moderate your soil temperature, and gradually add nutrients as it breaks down. In my decade plus of gardening, I have used all types of mulch, from straw, shredded leaves, aged wood chips, and old spoiled hay. I honestly can't tell you one is any better than the other. Just use what you can get and what's free preferably. One quick note, if you will be using hay or straw, be sure it wasn't sourced from a field that was sprayed with herbicides. That is a problem we are seeing more and more often, and unfortunately, those herbicides are persistent, meaning they really stay in that plant long after it's been harvested. Okay, mistake number 7 is treating all plants the same when it comes to soil pH. For example, blueberries need very acidic soil around the 4.5 on the pH scale, while most vegetables prefer somewhere between a 6 and a 7 pH. If you try to grow both in the same bed, something's going to suffer big time. So group plants together based on similar pH requirements. Google can help you here. You might need separate raised beds for something like acid-loving plants. These are going to be your blueberries and even potatoes. Neutral plants, like pretty much most of your summer vegetables. And maybe even separate beds for your alkaline-tolerant plants like brassicas. That's going to be your cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, etc. A simple pH soil test kit costs under $20 typically, and it can save you hundreds in failed plants. Okay, mistake number 8 is cramming plants too close together, and trust me, every gardener does this, including myself. But let me start on this point by saying there are two sides to this coin. First, did you know that the spacing guidelines on seed packets were largely created for traditional in-ground row gardens, and that even just with average soil? Well, obviously, raised beds are totally different. When you have nutrient-rich, deep, loose soil in a raised bed, plants can absolutely grow closer together without competing too much for nutrients. Your tomatoes don't need to be 3 feet apart if your soil is packed with the good stuff. But if you want to plant densely, you have to accommodate that from the beginning by adding in rich soil components and amendments that we mentioned in a previous point. More plants in a bed mean more nutrient demand, which is fine if you supply those nutrients. On the flip side, if you're trying to save money and fill your raised beds as cheaply as possible, which I have done plenty of times, you just need to be extra careful not to overplant. Budget soil, topsoil, Walmart, Lowe's, something like that, it just simply can't support intensive planting. My general rule of thumb, if you've invested in premium soil amendments, you can push to about 75% of the recommended spacing on your seed packets. But if you're working with a basic soil mix, stick closer to the recommendations. That said, also remember that proper airflow prevents disease. Those tiny seedlings will become huge plants that need room to breathe. So if you live in the South especially, or somewhere else with really humid summers, go generous on your spacing. Okay, mistake number 9 is assuming that raised beds are magically protected from pests. Trust me, bugs and critters will find their way into containers and raised beds. My favorite pest prevention solution is a simple hoop system. I use polytubing. It's the type of black piping used in drip irrigation systems, and I bend them into little arches or hoops over my beds. For my concrete raised beds, this works out so easily because I simply use 18-inch sticks of rebar. I put them inside the holes of the concrete blocks and slip that polytubing over it. Then I cover with insect netting for bugs or even something cheaper like tulle. But it can go further than that. I can use floating row cover for frost protection, or I can swap it out for shade cloth during the intense summer heat. In my opinion, this simple hoop structure is very versatile. So there you have it, 8 common mistakes that can really derail your raised bed garden. But remember, we all make mistakes, as proven in the previous point where I put my bed right up against a fence. That's okay. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. What matters is that you keep trying, keep learning, and keep growing no matter what. That's all for today, and we will see you next time. Bye.